Well, welcome everyone. Today is our second session of our economic resilience series, which is part of our development sessions. My name is Chris Higdon. I'm the Community Development Manager for the Georgia Municipal Association. I also serve as the Loan Program Manager for the Georgia Cities Foundation. And we have a wonderful guest today, Courtney Harcourt with the City of Newnan. We started this series recently. This is our second series, as I mentioned. We have been fortunate in our positions with the Community and Economic Development Department at GMA and through the Georgia Cities Foundation to see how through this current economic and health crisis that we're experiencing, how cities and small businesses have been able to pivot and continue to function and in many cases thrive. And we're trying to share those great examples with everyone. So I'm going to turn it over to Courtney in just a second. And just a little bit of housekeeping real quick. You can ask questions at any point during the session. Stephanie Russell with our office will be monitoring that, as well as myself. And we will interrupt Courtney when the time is right to provide questions. And also I need to mention that this session is being recorded. And with that, I will hand it over to Courtney.
Hi, Chris, and thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to share some examples from Newnan. If you want to get started with the PowerPoint, we could move right through those things. All right, so welcome to virtual Newnan off of Spring Street. This will begin our presentation on resiliency and response. Next slide. We're going to start with talking about brick and click storefronts. And I also want to mention we're going to try really hard not to focus on COVID-19 specifically during this PowerPoint, but I would like to note how much of it has been an opportunity because of COVID-19. It's really a direct response to it, but rather than looking at it from a response perspective, we want to kind of look at it through the lens of how we're going to use temporary programs and temporary efforts to really become more permanent features within the world we work in. So looking at downtown storefronts before the pandemic and now during, this idea of brick and click has kind of really come to play to where you're operating a business model as an online storefront and a brick and mortar storefront and linking the two into really more of a single effort. Next slide. This is a pretty unique statistic, I thought, and I hope that it's accurate, but it's estimated that 74% of retail sales are actually going to be in store. And if you look over to the side column here, 9% will be online sales shipped from warehouse, 6% click and collect sales, 6% shipped from store sales, and 5% of other. So if you really think about the idea of having an online presence and an online store, but also having a brick and mortar storefront, you're really kind of touching upon a lot of these different sales, these percentages of sales. And so you can see how the two would really complement each other. Next slide. Here's another unique measure. Again, hoping these statistics are correct. I did do a little research, so I'm hoping they're there. But if you look at revenue and sales spent from 2017, and then what's anticipated for 2024 in online sales, you can see where it is important for brick and mortar storefronts to sort of engage with these audiences. Next slide. Some other benefits of having a brick-to-click type of approach to business. It provides a lot of authenticity for brick and mortar storefronts. So if you get on Yelp right now and you're new to an area and you see reviews for some places, but you don't see reviews from others, it really sort of, it shows one versus the other. And you really need to be able to Google search for a business. I was surprised at some of our more successful businesses here in Newnan pre-pandemic didn't have websites. They were so reliant on foot traffic that they didn't seem to need one. And within a couple of weeks, it was very obvious that several of them were developing some sort of online presence, either through, most of them, the quick response with social media, and a lot of them have, developed some other mode of communication in recent months. Also, having a brick and mortar storefront provides authenticity for online presence. So it's more of a show that you're withstanding somewhere other than just an online store. Having an online presence shows it makes you more competitive with big box. I know that especially for those of us who seek out shopping local, being able to connect with someone locally through the internet helps. Brick and click, it helps district branding. Maybe a couple of your neighbors have a brick and mortar storefront and an online shop, and maybe a couple of others don't. Seeing several businesses within the same area to a visitor shows that you're a district versus just an independent store, which is important for small businesses, especially retail that relies heavily on foot traffic, and also some restaurants. Having both brick and click can provide staffing solutions. You'll hear restaurants more frequently complain about having a system that can take online orders that then goes directly to the kitchen, rather than having someone there to pick up a phone and then write a ticket and then sending it to the kitchen. So you can sort of, if you're going to upgrade and offer either curbside pickup or things of that nature, you can use those programs through to bring those tickets to the kitchens. Inventory tracking, that's a big benefit for retailers. Most of the brick and click types of programs through websites do offer inventory tracking, inventory optimization. You can have sales and promotions online that you don't have within your storefront and vice versa, and you can develop tools to capture that. Brick and click can actually enhance the customer service experience if you can somewhat provide an extra personal touch online that you can also embrace within your storefront. It just demonstrates that your entire operation is smooth and does have that personal touch. It demonstrates advancement in relationships with customers. I know I've recently seen a business in downtown Newnan who did not even have a website before the COVID pandemic. They now even have a text message service that sends you a nice little greeting when your to-go order is ready, which is nice. Provides measurable sales data. You can actually watch both in-store and online how your business is growing, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, rather than keeping up with the notebook or maybe just ordering it well. It provides an opportunity for rapid response and rapid communication, which does provide more work, but customers really expect that at this point. I know a lot of retailers, they're responding to Facebook messages and messages through Instagram and email and text messages. So even though that does kind of bear down and it can be a little bit more effort, customers do expect that, so that gives the business an advantage. And it provides an opportunity to grow. And in either or direction, having an online presence can allow you to go and test things out a little bit easier than you might do in your brick and mortar storefront. Next slide. So here in Newnan, we have launched a brick and click grant. It's a matching grant up to $500. We found that most of our businesses weren't willing to spend more than $1,000 on a new piece of technology. So that seemed to be more of a measurable number. We have an online application that we encourage you guys to look at it's through mainstreetnewnan.com. So any point of sale upgrades that we fund, they must collect local sales tax. And the service purchase also has to support something that occurs within the brick and mortar storefront. So we're really not encouraging businesses to, leave the downtown district and just be a strictly online store. Next slide. And so now we're, actually, let's go back. I'd like to open up questions about the brick and click program that we have for our grant program, and or just the strategy in general.
Well, we haven't, let's solicit some questions or comments. I'm looking at the chat window here, Courtney, and I did ask folks to let me know what cities they're from, and so far I've heard Metter and Sandersville, and that was kind of what I was wanting to hear, because and we've got Stockbridge also. So Stockbridge just popped up. So Stockbridge is going to be more like Newnan, but it may be interesting for our folks in more rural communities to find out that small businesses, downtown businesses, even in more metro area cities like Newnan, still didn't have much in the way of an online presence. So this type of program, this type of resource and research is really relevant to probably most small businesses in this country, regardless of where they're located. So I just wanted to point that out. Does anyone have any questions they want to chime in right now? And if I don't see anything, I'll let you keep rolling. I'll ask one real quick. We got one. Who decides who gets the grants? Do you have a committee that evaluates the business's needs? Great
Staff. Myself and my coworker, we review those grant applications. We really haven't had an overwhelming amount. There are several people out there that are testing free software right now and determining which of those free softwares are going to stick. And I think we'll see some additional applications, after that trial, that period ends. But yeah, we actually mimic this program off of our facade grant program, which is something I'll mention throughout the rest of the PowerPoint when you talk about preparedness and where you find the foundation for grant programs and temporary efforts. But for the most part, it really doesn't take more than 2 people to look at it if the application process is strong itself.
Great question, and thank you for that. I'm curious, do you have a gut feel, because there may not be much in the way of data right now, but do you have a gut feel for how strong of a need there is for retail versus restaurants in terms of having an online ordering capability?
Yeah, so it's really unique. When we first started putting the research together for the program, I would say my expectations were mostly retail driven as far as the needs were concerned. We heard businesses during the initial phases of the pandemic or the stay-at-home order, they would tell us they were using Facebook and Instagram and trying to piece together websites to sell their products in store, and they were having inventory problems, but they were apprehensive to purchase the software they needed because they didn't know how long this was going to last. And we heard a lot of that. And then I would say around May, we started hearing more from the restaurants and that they needed assistance in keeping the kitchen up to date with the to-go orders because they were having in-store orders take place for the first time. And so doing both at the same time was really problematic. And so several of our restaurant owners had to purchase technology, or they're currently in the process of testing different plugins that allows the kitchen and the floor to communicate at the same time. So
well, we just got a, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, but we got another question.
Sure, yeah. So it's 50-50 now, I would say, is okay. What we're seeing.
Perfect. Well, this is a great, perfectly timed question. Are there platforms out there that you've seen that you think are better for restaurants as opposed to retail?
Yeah, so I don't know specific platforms. I think a lot of restaurants already pay really heavy fees for their existing point of sale. And a lot of those restaurants are finding that that system has either been updated or tweaked, or there's an extra offering that they can purchase or add to their plans to kind of work with what they already had. As far as retail is concerned, there's a lot out there. We've seen retailers who are engaging with their own websites to try to develop plugins that will connect to some of the different options through Facebook. I think that there's a Facebook kind of like shop that you can set up. I've heard of those. And also Shopify. I know that Shopify is becoming a really popular way to appear to have a website, but it actually be through Shopify's platform. Some of the requests that we funded have been through Square. With more online sales, retailers that use Square have sort of modified how they're approaching Square, and Square does have a lot more to offer than what I would have ever known and before beginning my research, and seeing it. So those are some things I've seen. I don't know that, I don't own a business, and I don't know that I would be the right person to suggest one technology versus the other. We just try to work with each individual business owner and find out what works best for them and make sure that what they're doing really just falls into the criteria, collects sales tax. It's not going to cause them to leave the downtown district, and that, they're working to build that approach of having the dual face online and in the store.
Well, that's great. Thank you. I'll add real briefly, I believe that Instagram now has a purchase platform. I don't know what you would call it, like Facebook. I'm not all that familiar with either. Just from my personal shopping in Decatur, in the Atlanta metro area, where we do have a lot of easy options for online food ordering, I've seen personally more people going away from Grubhub and Uber Eats and platforms that charge a high percentage, and using it seems like I see new platforms coming up overnight, like Toast and Chow Now, not to be confused with Chow Hound, that are very, very low fees for the restaurants. The only reason I mention that, they're oftentimes are usually not delivery based, and I have a feeling that these might be good alternatives for rural restaurants that aren't necessarily looking to get into the delivery game, but do need a way to provide online ordering capabilities for pickup that are low fees. But I'm not an expert on that. It's just something that I've observed personally. I think we can probably move on to the next area, Courtney.
Great. So now we're going to kind of go into, again, not wanting to be COVID focused, but some things that have popped up recently here in response to COVID, and how we've sort of watched them evolve and be sort of put into place. So I want to begin by talking about preparedness. A couple of years ago, we put together a placemaking master plan here in downtown Newnan. And from that, over the past couple of years, we've little by little adopted things from that placemaking master plan into our annual plan of work that we'd really like to see flourish, or we'd like to attempt and maybe put some money into our budget to see those things happen. And in 2020, we happened to have in our plan of work that we wanted to see pop-ups, parklets, open streets, those concepts, district branding, and vacant space activation. Prior to the pandemic, we did have an open container ordinance in place for special events. So we weren't really unfamiliar with having open containers in downtown Newnan. We have a very flexible website. There's a lot of options that you can turn on and turn off that assist both business owners and the program and or guests to host events in downtown Newnan. And we've had a very diverse communication outlet with web-based integration for all of our businesses. If you sign up for an event through the program, you do so online. It's mobile friendly. If you want to be a volunteer, a sponsor, or a program participant, you can do that online. You can sign up for our facade grant program, now our brick and click grant program. You can apply there. You can also create your own online storefront, add a sale or promotion to our calendar. So all of those options are there for business owners. We communicate weekly via email. We also send out text message alerts because we find some of our business owners are more reliant on text message than they are email. And we host in-person meetings, which more recently have been hosted through Zoom. And then I also wanted to mention our facade grant program because we were able to modify the way that process works for our brick and click program. So all of these things pre-pandemic, pre-stay-at-home order, we had thought about, had learned about, had talked about, our DDA was aware of. The city manager's office was aware of some of these things or has promoted it in the past. And so when the time came, it wasn't all that difficult to digest and to quickly react to the stay-at-home order and then opening back up. So I wanted to make note of how important preparedness is, even when you don't know what you're preparing for. So next slide. And then in May of 2020, the City of Newnan enacted a temporary recovery ordinance. It gave businesses the option to use public space right by request to conduct business, including parking spaces, public alleys, which we haven't received any of those requests, but it is an option, sidewalks, and neighboring spaces by request. So if you're a restaurant and you'd like to space out tables in front of an attorney's office that might not need their storefront, you could do that with their permission and by request from the city manager's office. Our open container district is permitted Monday through Saturday, noon to midnight. Now, we already had a bistro drinking, I guess you could say, was permitted pre-COVID, and on Sunday, if you wanted to have, an alcoholic beverage outside, you could do so within the state's, permissible time frame. So staff basically assists with designing, if need be, and approving plans within about a 24-hour turnaround if it's Monday through Friday. It's really easy. Myself and my coworker, we put the plans together. We send them to our supervisor, who is our assistant city manager. He will typically either approve it or call us and have a quick conversation, and we'll make recommendations for change or move forward. I would say a majority of our restaurants, we have seen something come across the table from them, even if it's just spreading out tables and chairs. This is going to be in effect until January the 31st of 2021. And as staff, we have started layering programs and events over time. We didn't do it all at once, of course. We watched it, tested it, made sure everything was working correctly. And so I'd like to just share a little bit about this with you guys if we want to go to the next slide. So this was really the first thing we saw come about. It was very temporary. It's still in place. And I want to say it was about a day's worth of effort. This is a local restaurant, and most of the stuff that you see outside belongs to the Main Street program, believe it or not. When we got up and going and we had, this temporary ordinance in place, we reached out to all of the business owners, called them, dropped the information by, and worked with them to try to get plans together as fast as we could. And the lucky first few actually got to use the items that we used during our special events. And just a side note, these tables and chairs were purchased with a program that we worked with the Georgia Cities Foundation. So Chris, thank you guys for that. And they've been sort of our turning wheel and test grounds for placemaking. We like table bombing and moving them around, and we're happy that they're being used in parklets currently. We can go to the next slide. This is an actual, I guess you would say, retail pop-up and parklet. This is an art gallery. They requested to use 3 spaces every first Friday of the month. I put the renderings in because I wanted to illustrate that you can actually create these renderings yourself. I am not into graphic design by any means, but I used Canva, which is free software, to put these together, and then we sent these images along to the city manager's office for approval, and that's sort of how we're creating these applications, and just to kind of show you guys what that looks like. And then you can see below the in-person results. You've got people spaced out. That's a bar of some sort. There's the van. It's great. It adds some pizzazz to the whole ordeal. There's bistro lights, and there's art. So yeah, it was a really neat promotion. We can go to the next slide. And so, looking at the way that we're using temporary space here in Newnan, we've also started programming it. So that first Friday event is actually a part of a bigger series called our Forward Fridays. They're short-term projects to sort of determine the effectiveness, and it allows us an opportunity to gather community feedback. So currently, the individual businesses who participate, they really have their own sort of special event within their business, and they're allowed to take things outside to sort of create a safer and more inviting environment. Our first event was successful, or I guess you would call it a promotion rather than an event, because we didn't provide entertainment. We didn't technically staff the event, although some of us did, stay after to check it out. And we didn't have a lot of requirements for the business owners. It was just simply gathering all of their information and creating a website that shows who's going to be open, and then also shows which of them are having specials and promotions during the hours of the promotion, if you will. But I think programming really does add that level of what's successful, what's not successful, what do people like, what do they feel comfortable with, and how do we trim this for the next show. So that's one thing to consider, is preparedness and then programming. And then we can go to the next slide. And then permanence. So out of all of these temporary efforts that we have, launched, kind of like we're in this idea now, are we weeding out what we want to stick and what's working, what's not working? And I think that as communities, we're all really at that point right now, to where we've learned how to create temporary products, put those out there, and figure out what we want to stick. So here's just some ideas. This isn't anything formal, but we're going to go through some of what we've seen. This is, I think, a great project, and I know a lot of downtowns did this. It's not that Newnan is, the only one, but when high school graduation was canceled this year, we purchased banners for our graduates, and they were up downtown, and they got people excited. We saw graduates taking photos under them, and when we bought these banners, we bought them to put up for the next couple of years until they're, no longer useful. So that's just an example of this, what permanence are we driving from these permanent or from these temporary actions? Next slide. So I'm using this as an example. This is a Facebook post that a local restaurant used to advertise their curbside service during the stay-at-home order. And as you can see, we have Tom Hanks in the passenger seat, and he's picking up to-go food. And then in the bottom right corner, you see some of our curbside parking signs. And then you ask yourself the question, do you still relate to this? Because when I first saw the photo, it was this week, and I had to really think about it. Like, okay, well, there's Tom Hanks and he's getting a bag. Oh, it's because he had COVID. So, that's one of those things we're looking at now is what's going to stick. Next slide. So if you look at this photo, this is a parklet. This is 714, the same restaurant that put that post together. If you'll notice where their curbside parking sign is, it's kind of telling. We've seen most of our restaurants prop these things up on the side of buildings at this point. They're no longer using them. About a month and a half ago, we went around and we picked a lot of them up. There's still a handful of them out and about, but you're really starting to see the business community tell you which of these things they like and which of these things they don't. And you could walk around downtown Newnan the week we took them up, and you could see them propped up against street furniture, buildings. They kind of just naturally, as business picked back up, found themselves, alone in a corner somewhere. So that was one sign that we've listened to, and we really don't have a lot of curbside parking out anymore. And we haven't really had to come down and say, hey, businesses, we're taking this away from you. It's just kind of, it's timed itself out. Next slide. So in thinking about this parklet, this business has really enjoyed it. They had a very small dining space before the pandemic, before the stay-at-home order. I honestly feel like they may have more tables now than they did pre-COVID. And they've painted the sidewalk or the previous parking space with the washable substance, but I think that they maintain it. They add more to it. And they really have created kind of this unique little culture within their parklet. So we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to take this away from them? What's that going to look like? Or do we provide a permanent opportunity for them to keep this parklet? Now, I don't know the answer, but those are things I think we're all thinking about that should be considered moving forward.
Courtney, do they have permission, have to ask permission from the salon in that case, or was it, since it was in a parking space, did that matter?
Well, the salon wasn't thrilled. I think they have worked it out, but that's the city owns that parking space, and we gave the restaurant permission to program it. And so, that's another thing that you have to think about when you're creating temporary ordinances and you're giving businesses permission in a very short time frame is, is this going to impact the neighbor, and how do you justify not giving them the parking space, especially when the need was there? I do know it caused a little bit of conflict. I have received a recent update that they've come to terms with it. But, I think parking and parklets probably have the same battle with neighbors. This is no different than a business owner really parking in front of a business every day as far as their complaints were concerned. So yeah, it's never easy, but that was, the city gave the restaurant permission to be there, and so it's there.
Thanks, Courtney.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. And so our events, this is our Market Day event. We've hosted one Market Day. It was very successful. It was spread out, completely different from what you see right here. We have pretty small sidewalks in Newnan. I want to say most of them, at the most, they give you around 12 feet worth of space. And then we have wonderful light fixtures and, street furniture and trees and dogs and people and strollers. And so we've been limited to this sidewalk for so long. And it's been okay, but it's way too crowded to host events on the sidewalk with the current conditions. So we've really spread it out a bit, but I'd like for you guys to kind of notice how close everything is. The cars, people, the animals, the children, the vendors, the tents, the face painting. It's all within close quarters. Next slide. We previously hosted the market like so. You can see there's 57 spaces on this map. And if you look at the far right, you can see, they're all lined up, nicely lined. It's organized, and there is, there's enough room for you to walk and to get a stroller or a wheelchair around. Next slide. But we have heard a lot of positive feedback from participants when they have this much room. The tents are spaced 10 feet apart, and we're currently operating at a much lower capacity than we could in normal circumstances, but the streets are closed. We're going back to that open streets idea. People have room to move around. They're not elbow to elbow. And so now that we've hosted it this way, we're hearing people say, well, we would really love for it to always be hosted this way. And I don't know that that's going to happen, but we're listening and we're wondering, is this something we learn from? Do we go back when we're allowed to host events the way that we used to? Is this the better option? If you look at the map to the right, conveniently, Google Earth took a photo during market day. So you can actually see our former setup, and then you can see the way that we're setting up currently. So it's very interesting. And if you think about only having 9 vendors on each side, the potential to double that, or even really triple it, because you could spread these tents out and give everyone, maybe after we're through with, our current situation with being responsible and spacious, maybe they get 3 feet apart, instead of 10, and the whole market fits in the streets. We have no clue. Parking is such a commodity to downtown businesses. It would have to be, a really big conversation to have, but it's not something that people aren't talking about. So we're listening, and we don't know what the outcome will be, but it's just an idea that's been floating around. Next slide. So from May until the end of January, visitors can walk around the area highlighted in this map, and they may decide to leave a restaurant with an alcoholic beverage and, peruse around the square. And it's permissible. I think it's going to be a difficult, luxury to take away from people. I don't know if we're going to be interested in continuing that, but I know that communities around Georgia, they're having this alcohol conversation right now, and that a lot of downtowns have made this permissible, and a lot of downtowns are going to have to decide at some point whether or not they want to continue to permit it. And so that's another, idea of permanence. How are we going to deal with this? Next slide. And then our website, for example, social media, all of these different outlets that we've been communicating with business owners, we've seen our communication through some of these outlets and the interest in these outlets grow far larger than they've ever been. During the stay-at-home order, we went through and made sure every restaurant and retailer had a space on our website. And we moved them into different categories based on who was open or closed. And we created lists, and we took on the role of sort of creating content for them. And so we do have business owners that are a little bit more independent and update this themselves. And we have other business owners who have started asking us for assistance more often. And, we've kind of got respond and go a little bit out of our technical terms of fill out the form, do this, do that. Like, let's make sure it's to the T's, how we operated beforehand. And we're more laid back and flexible. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's something that should stay, is being more conversational and less rigid with some of these processes. So our customer service is changing, and I think that some of it will stick. Next slide. So this is a good example as well. A lot of our businesses who were bringing the furniture from inside of their stores are now purchasing furniture to stay outside of their stores. And that's something I think that we'll see continue. This particular business from the very beginning bought furniture, but I thought that it was a good example of permanence, and that we probably will see more bistro seating, and we'll have to probably be a little bit more flexible because our ordinance prior to this only allowed for a business to occupy 50% of their storefront. So that's something that, you know, we'll have to respond to at some point. This business, you know, has a great window, but if you look at it, it almost is a little bit over 50% of their storefront. So, you know, these are things to consider. I don't think it really gets in the right of way. I could get a stroller, a wheelchair, and a dog around this all at once, but it might not have been an opportunity prior to these temporary ordinances, you know, being observed. Next slide. Going back to our next set of steps, I think we have to redefine preparedness again and look at plans and look at conversations and really analyze what's going on to look at 2021. So at this point, if we have time, Chris, I'd love to sort of just open up a conversation and maybe hear how other communities are looking at permanence, or, you know, if you're looking at permanence, and share some ideas, because I think all of us are really focused on one measure that has changed for the positive that might need to stick. So.
Absolutely. We will, I'm getting a little feedback. Might be in your end, Courtney, I'm not sure. We did have one question I wanted to mention real quick. It was really a request if you could share your temporary ordinance or ordinances. And if you can get that to us, I'm sure we can send that out to the participants.
Absolutely, yeah. And if I did put my email address on the screen, if anyone wants to ask a direct question and or have more of a conversation about things that we have found successful, I'd love to say that we're, you know, really innovative and came up with all of this on our own, but I think a lot of communities are doing the same thing right now, at least at this point. So I'd be happy to connect anyone that has a question with other communities I know that are, you know, that have success stories as well. So
we're getting praise from Cindy, so that's always good. Does anyone have anything that they want to add from their local community? As Courtney mentioned, there's a lot of the similar approaches that are happening around the state in order to help small businesses right now. And I think that everyone has the question of what's going to remain. You know, what things may have been really scary before this experience that now are being proven to be less of an issue than the staff or elected officials or public safety or any of those folks may have thought that it would be. So does there anyone want to chime in here? I would even say feel free to unmute yourself if you'd rather just speak. You may have provided all the answers that these folks needed, Courtney.
Great. Well, hope you guys will, reach out if you need anything. I would like to mention that from a safety perspective, we have not seen any issues come up with the open container ordinance. Nor did we ever have an issue allowing for that during our special events. So that is, a great thing to be able to comment about.
Yeah, and that's really good information for everyone, and I've been hearing that around the state from metro to rural. I think this is an unfortunate way to learn some valuable lessons, but we're all going to take away a lot of good information and new practices when we come out of this together. It'll make us more prepared for the next issue that comes down the road. We do have one. What are your mask requirements at the individual businesses or their outdoor spaces, if any?
If any. We really have taken more of a team approach to that. It started with testing it out through our market day vendors. Currently, our market's at half capacity, so we have our annual vendors participating, and then if there's a cancellation through an annual vendor, we fill those spaces with more essential products, so food or ag-based. And we really try to just build our market vendors up and, let them know, hey, you guys are our annual vendors. We trust you. We have invited you here because of that. And we can't force anyone to wear a face mask. It's just impossible, but we haven't had a problem with it. To my knowledge, I'm sure that, there's circumstances to where visitors don't wear face masks, but as it relates to market day vendors, they've been really respectful and thankful for the opportunity to, conduct business. And it went really well. I can't think of an exact answer and how we would, force people to wear a face mask. But yeah, it's just kind of, building that team mentality and really hoping that each individual business will be responsible. So that's sort of where we're at with that. It's emphasized that it's strongly suggested. Myself and my coworker, we have on our masks when we do different things, host events, go into businesses. We just try to lead by example. And I think that realistically, that's all here in Noonan we can do is, be really professional in how we host the events and build up everyone around us to sort of do the same. So
great. Thank you, Courtney. Well, seeing no more questions, I'm going to thank everyone for participating today, and especially thank you, Courtney. It was a wonderful presentation. This has been recorded with the intentions of having it available to anyone to view later. So anyone that that would benefit from this information from in your community or outside, please feel free to share once we have it uploaded on our site. So with that, if there's nothing else, I will thank everyone for being here, and thank you, Courtney. Oh, you're muted, Courtney.
Thank you.